China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Those are Chinese war drums you hear introducing China Watch Radio. And ladies and gentlemen, you can hear those war drums beating all over the world right now because China is teamed up with Russia to have war games against the West, and that's us. And that all of that leads us to ask today, does China have enough money to win a war with the West?
Or population.
There you go. Welcome to China Watch Radio today. Michael Olson here. Bill Graff's on the boards. Hello, Bill.
Hi. Hello, sir.
Now, what do you have for us today, Bill?
Well, I'm going to
lead things off with.
I'm going to check in. We're going to do a couple of things. I'm going to talk to you about the Solomon Islands. And later on, I might check in on the Belt and Road Initiative.
Belt and Road. Very good.
Outstanding.
David Welch, how about you? What do you
good afternoon, gentlemen. Yeah, I've got a couple of interesting stories on China's demographics. Is spelled doom and not domination.
There you go.
The other thing is interesting on the second hour is the world decoupling. 5 Chinese companies, giants that have delisted from our stock exchanges.
There you go. Jonty, what do you have for us?
Well, there's a rather large Chinese spy ship which has recently docked in a Sri Lankan port. Of course, Sri Lanka's had some interesting economic issues recently. And then there's also some interesting information that I've managed to dig up about the actual sort of economics of China versus Taiwan.
Good.
That should be good, yeah.
And what are you going to talk about?
Well, first I'm going to say we also have on the control room right there Susan Simon, who's in a big yawn. I caught her with a yawn there.
I was not yawning.
Okay.
I was stretching.
Stretching. And then what I have to offer today in the first half hour is a story about, an update from Wuhan Virology Institute. Folks have been following that story ever since it broke, way back when, both here and on the Food Chain Radio show. So I'm always fascinated about Wuhan Virology Institute because I see it as a whole new form, maybe not a new form, but a technologically precise form of warfare that we're faced with. I think the genie is out of the bottle.
Maybe not warfare, but certainly weaponry.
Well, yes, there you go.
Billy, yeah.
And then in the second hour, I'm going to pick up once again a subject we've worked on a number of times, and that, of course, is the collapse of the Chinese real estate market. And that's our second theme for the day is kind of the economy of China. We're going to looking at various aspects of the Chinese economy and try to find out where all the money is that they can bring to bear in a war, and do they have that money? So that's the second hour, and that, of course, is your hour out there, ladies and gentlemen. So give a listen to what we lay on the table in the first hour, and then call us up and let us know what you think of our world and that of China. So Wuhan Virology Institute, back in the news. An American scientist, Dr. Stephen Quay, claims to have found evidence that scientists at the Wuhan Virology Institute have been researching a virus far more deadly than COVID-19. And they were doing that back in 2019, which is even before COVID-19, right? So the virus
I'm sure COVID wasn't the only thing they were working on.
No, not at all. One of the things they were working on was the Nipah virus. That's NIPAH. Have you heard of that?
No.
Billy, have you heard of that? Nobody's ever heard of that.
No.
I haven't heard of that. What on earth is the Nipah virus? Well, it's a virus that's less transmissible than COVID, but 60 times more deadly than COVID.
Good grief.
So it's not transmitted through the air like COVID is, but that figures into what's going on in Wuhan right now. So when asked by a Senate committee what made research into the Nipah virus so dangerous, Dr. Quay responded, when you have a virus that is 60 times more deadly than COVID, but is not transmissible via air, and you make it transmissible via air,
Good Lord.
then you have something that's truly frightening.
It's weaponized.
It's weaponized. Yes.
Bad science fiction movie come true.
Exactly. So Dr. Quay said that Wuhan was conducting gain-of-function research on the Nipah, which is against international treaty. Now, do you think that China would do anything against an international treaty that they said?
No, not China.
No. And furthermore, they were conducting this research at a low-grade biological laboratory, which was not the top grade, not the most secure, but number 2 or 3.
And they don't have problems with leakage at their top labs either, right?
Right. So Dr. Quay said he was able to discover the Nipah research by the careful forensic analysis of the tremendous amount of data that was pouring out of the Wuhan Virology Institute back in 2019, 2020, before the CCP turned off the spigot. So that they were just pumping out data like crazy. And he was able to, he knew how to go into this research.
So they're probably showing off the bravado of their scientific
Of course, look
capability
what
at the
we're
time.
doing.
Yeah.
Look what we're doing, exactly. Here's where the story gets really interesting. The Nipah virus was given to Wuhan by Canada's National Microbiology Laboratory.
So it started in Canada?
What?
It came out of a Canadian National Biological
Well, that's a frightening thing. It's in itself.
Microbiology
Good
Laboratory.
grief.
So how did they get it out of Canada? Well, it turns out that there was a Chinese doctor named Qin Jianguo who was working at the Canadian lab, and she made the arrangements for the transfer. So she somehow got the virus out of the Canadian lab, transferred it to the Wuhan Virology Institute. She was later arrested.
Yeah.
And the Canadian government and the officials have no reason why they arrested her.
Why are we working on this stuff that can kill us quick? I have no idea.
And why are we giving it to China?
It sounds like they stole
Why
it.
is
in this case,
Canada
but
working on this
That's my
stuff?
point, Billy. It's like, isn't that just insane?
So Chinese officials are reporting the discovery of a new virus circulating in China called the Longya Henipa virus. Longya Henipa virus. Henipa is said to be closely related to the Nipah and has so far sickened a few dozen people in northern China, although no deaths have been reported at this time. So it just keeps getting weirder and weirder.
It's like a bad Ron Popeil commercial, but wait, there's more.
And you know what? There is more. Yeah. I just saw a segment. I was just looking at a segment about how the National Institutes of Health and the Wuhan Virology Institute are working on monkeypox virus.
No.
Now, the interesting thing about monkeypox virus is that it's closely related to what?
Well, it's
Smallpox.
Smallpox.
Yeah.
Smallpox.
There's a breakout of that.
Yes. So if they can come up with a cure for monkeypox, maybe it will cure smallpox. That's what's a good thing to do if we can do it right. But if they're weaponizing this stuff, that's a serious concern too. And that's what Wuhan Virology Institute has been doing, is the gain of function research again. Gain of function, giving it more functions than it has on its own. Now, another big worry about this monkeypox is that it could become endemic if it escapes from people into animals, and it already has. There are two gentlemen in France who have a puppy, and the puppy has monkeypox that they got from the guys.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't it get its name from starting out in monkeys?
That's what I thought too.
Who knows? Yeah. I wouldn't dare to comment on that because I could get in dangerous territory if I do. But what the fear is that if it does get into dogs and cats, and they carry it around.
Oh, yeah.
It'd be like
Everybody and his brother
plague.
has a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So, those are my 2 items out of the Wuhan Virology Institute.
Well, I've had enough. I'll see you.
Exactly. I was going to say, go to a commercial.
Show's over. No, Michael, if I could just ask something
Sure.
for clarification's sake. The National Institute of Health, the U.S. National Institute of Health, is continuing to fund the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Is that correct?
That's what I understand, yes.
So, I mean, this is the only thing that I can think to explain this. Well, look, we know that there's a bit of a revolving door situation between the CDC, the FDA, and the NIH. We had, what's his name, Gottlieb, the former, I think he was former director of the FDA or something. He's now on the board of directors of Pfizer. So, I mean, if you want to dig into it, dig into it. So we've got pharmaceutical companies that are connected with our national health apparatus. Our national health apparatus funds knowingly dangerous research in faraway lands where they can get away with things they can't get away with here.
That's exactly
And
right. That's exactly right. That's it, and that's why they are, I think.
With a statistically high percentage, a statistically high risk of creating yet more pandemics, which would then create a massive demand for
Vaccines.
various interventions from the pharmaceutical industries.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the only thing I can think of to explain why we're still doing this. And the public outcry, where is it?
Follow the money. You're exactly right, Jonty. When you want to find out about something, follow the money. And there's big money in pharmaceutical cures for problems.
If you think about it, it's a pretty good business plan.
Well, absolutely. Create the problem, then fix
Have the
it.
cure. There you go.
But the risk of that business plan is that you really are looking at
Annihilation.
A guillotine situation where if people find out what you're doing, then...
Well, that's interesting. Do you think people don't know what they're doing? I mean, do you really think there's anybody left in the United States
Yes.
of America
Yes.
that does not know
Yes,
what they're
I do.
doing?
Yeah.
Really?
There
Yeah.
are people out there that don't pay attention, Michael.
Ostrich is the absolute head in the sand.
There really are.
Yeah. You know, I was looking at a chart of trust in news media in the U.S.
Oh, boy.
And it listed all the different most prominent news sites.
KSCO was number one.
And it was interesting. There were only two. It was only, I think, Newsmax and Fox News that had a little bit of trust from the Republicans. The Republicans absolutely did not trust all other news media. The Democrats, on the other hand, really trust a lot of these news sources. So I found that very interesting. I don't like to get particularly partisan myself, but I know a lot of folks, and a lot of folks are quite happy to. They would be wearing Dr. Fauci shirts and singing the praises of Walensky.
You know, that's a very interesting notion about who you should trust with respect to the media. I tend not to trust those media with whom I most agree, because I figure if I'm in sympathy with them, I'm an easy mark for them. Now, those publications and whatnot that I don't agree with, well, I can take them with a nice grain of sand, but it's the ones that I agree with that kind of frighten me.
It's funny, the way I look at it is if I'm reading an article from a particular news media and I've never heard that line of thinking before, then I at least pay attention because it's something it's not like the company line I'm familiar with or the opposing company line I'm familiar with. It's some line I've never heard of, and it does fascinate me to read those.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking exactly that this morning. If you look on Fox News and CNN, there's the things that they absolutely agree on, and there's the things they disagree on. The things they absolutely agree on, that's the propaganda. That's the stuff you really got to be careful of.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right, who's up? Which one of you gentlemen are up next? David?
I'll take her away. So Chinese demographics spells decline and spells decline, not domination. And this is really interesting. We've talked about on the program here over the last few months. The birth rates in China are declining, and it's interesting. American mortality here in the United States, we're largely breaking even with the fertility rate. but immigration is down actually a little bit. We've seen the pictures of undocumented people pouring over the borders, but still in absolute numbers, overall immigration itself is down. So we have a slight drop in decline. China, however, has a very significant drop in demographics, and a lot of it's driven. They don't have a lot of people who want to go move to China. So there isn't a lot of desire to emigrate to the country.
I used to want to go there, but I don't anymore.
Well, it was fun to visit. I've been there many times, and I've had my fill. Going back, certainly would not want to live there. But what's interesting is if you look at demography for a second, it isn't necessarily destiny, right? If population, in history was a major determinant, I mean, we would look at countries like China having conquered Europe in the 15th century, or Britain would not have conquered India, right, in the 18th century. Right. Small countries with high profiles in innovation have accomplished really great things. So it's not really, dominant population just as a top-line number means you automatically win. In fact, sometimes it's actually a bit of a hindrance because you've got this, the leverage that's needed to govern, a society that large, right, you tend to lose something in the sauce. If you think about it this way too, China is their biggest holiday, one of the biggest online holidays is Singledom. And last year, it's an e-commerce event.
It's like 11/11, right?
It's like 11/11, exactly, right, well put. And, if you just looked at the combined sales of Alibaba and JD.com, which are the equivalents of Amazon and Walmart.com in China, for us.
Yeah. And it's for single people.
It's for single people. And so single people rewarding themselves on this site, $139 billion of commerce on this day. This is like the Christmas holidays for us, right? This is just absolutely enormous. And you're celebrating being single. They have another term.
Which doesn't help your overall demographics.
It doesn't, and we know there's a shortage of women, right, because of the one birth and the single China or single child rule for such a long time in China. But they have another holiday which it basically means the bare branches holiday, where you're celebrating the fact that you've got no downline.
Wow.
Or you've got no other branches in your family tree, which is really astonishing when you think about that you're just basically looking into a cliff, in terms of
the end
of being able to keep pace.
So they have a holiday for the end?
Well, they're celebrating the fact they don't have to, save it all for somebody else.
Yeah.
Basically.
Well, in the UN itself, its projections report that China indeed is declining. This includes optimistic projections, including a high fertility. So if you look at their best number, right, their statistics, if you jack the fertility factor up to maximum, right, where basically you look at a girl and she has a baby, they are still in decline. Whereas if the United States, just alone on fertility, if you take the average fertility, which is reasonable, we're even. And if we have high fertility, we're actually growing organically. And that's not taking into account immigration in the United States.
Interesting.
Which I thought was just really fascinating looking forward. If we need population, we can get it, where it looks like they're going to run into a little bit of a crisis moving forward.
So to put that into lay terms, we're winning the old-fashioned way.
Yes, right. Yes, right. So we're, just kind of in summary here, like a lot of governments around the world, the Chinese are trying to counter this baby bust. So they're trying to provide incentives, taxes and other things, gifts to encourage you to get out and, get it on, right? Find a girl.
Outlawing condoms, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. But that's not working so well. And in fact, there's a number of other countries where that's had mixed results. Europe, for example, has tried incentives to encourage organic growth of population. And that's had some benefit in some countries, but overall it hasn't had the returns that people thought it would be.
I think it has a lot to do with the urban population. Yeah. And when you're in the country, you love kids because they can, pluck chickens for you, as it were.
And work.
And work. When you're in the city, what the heck good is a kid? You have to take them to soccer practice.
And you have to hire a babysitter when you go to work and all the rest of that.
Yeah, we're just going to close it. This goes around to how, we speak different languages, we're different colors in some cases, we were born up in completely different cultures, but there's some things about the human experience that's exactly the same. Oh. And, we haven't had as large of families as historically the United States either. And kind of when you look at the summary of the reason in China, around the root causes, is that There's an increasing sense of there's increasing education, which means more and greater employment opportunities, especially for women who delay maybe perhaps all the way through their childbearing years, to, forego children in lieu of other, personal means and goals and objectives.
There it is.
Yeah.
Okay, Billy, you're up.
Okay, so we've been talking about a bunch of different things involving China. One of the things that fascinates me about modern China is their desire to inject themselves in other cultures and other locations. And of course, we saw the big one recently about the Solomon Islands, and how China had sought to make an agreement with the Solomon Islands to have a harbor and some maritime stuff, and to help them by basically loaning them money that, in the long run, most people realized probably the Solomon Islands was not going to be able to pay back, and that leads to some bad conclusions in the Solomon Islands. But what I found interesting about the situation now is a lot of attention has come to the Solomon Islands, and a lot of outside, I don't want to say intervention, but outside concern from the neighbors of the Solomon Islands has come to bear. Now, the United States has been in that region for some time in various other locations. Australia and New Zealand are in that neck of the woods. And traditionally, when there was some sort of a conflict or some sort of a problem in the Solomon Islands, then what would happen is Australia or New Zealand or even the United States would step in and say, we need to take care of this. But there is that principle of self-determination where the world looks favorably upon the fact that we should leave our neighbors alone and let them deal with their own destiny. And, it's like when your dad said, okay, you're an adult now, make your own decisions, and you're probably going to make a mistake, but that's how we learn in life, yada, 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 right? Okay, so that's the way a lot of the world looks at the Solomon Islands now. Well, you're dealing with China, but Australia and New Zealand and the United States have all said, now, wait a minute, we're going to be your Uncle Joe here, and we're going to try to help you out and not make you have too many mistakes in this one.
Yeah.
How's that going?
Yeah, that's not going so well. So anyway, several democracies have had put up moral justifications for their help, trying to help the Solomon Islands, and economic justification. So anyway, I'm watching this because the problem is in the Solomon Islands, as it is in Vanuatu, Kiribati, Fiji, and Tonga, is that these islands all form a barrier that's good and bad. Barrier between Melanesia and the rest of the Pacific. And we found this out during World War II. Guadalcanal became a big focal point where a bunch of people died because it's a natural barrier.
Yes.
And so that's what they're looking at now. And the influence of domestic affairs in this area is unbelievable. So we're still watching it. We're still going to see what's going to happen. But it looks like the United States and Australia and New Zealand and the UK, as well as Japan, have all stepped in to say, wait a minute, we don't know if this is such a good idea, you guys in the Solomon Islands.
So what does the Solomon Islands say? What is the president of the Solomon Islands?
Well, they've backed down quite a bit from the original agreement they sought to make with China. But because they realize it would cause all kinds of other conflicts in the region. But they haven't backed away all the way.
Okay.
And Bill, you've done a good job of helping us not forget the criticality of that part of the world over the last few months, which has been fantastic.
Well, the thing about that part of the world is this. There was a world war, half a world war fought out there.
Yeah.
And all we need to do is ignore it just long enough to where we won't even be able to fight our way out of it.
I mean, certain inflection points of geography in this world has not changed.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And that's why we have all these standing agreements. We have NATO, we have the Pacific Treaty, we have all these things that are in place. And the reason we have them in place is because we don't want what happened. Look, if we forget what happened years ago, we'll repeat it.
Yep.
It's that simple. It's a famous guy, famous president said that.
Well, I talked to
which one?
When I was in Singapore years ago, I talked to a government official there who said, I'd asked him about the relationship with the United States, and how he mentioned how critical it was because we can make one phone call and we'll have F-18s overhead in a minute. And a lot of it was just keeping the shipping lanes clear.
Well, there you go.
Not only that, and forget, we have all kinds of hardware and military stuff out in that region where you pick a telephone up and...
Exactly, Billy, yeah.
So should we pick up John T. after the break here? Hold on, John T.
Hold on, John T.
Will do.
We got to go to a break. We'll be right back on China Watch Radio.
Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
Satisfy your hunger right now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito. Easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant, Kaito.
And now a special message from KSCO owner Michael Zwirling.
Last week, we ran a 3-minute message concerning a dispute KSCO is having with the Santa Cruz County Planning Department. The county government has ordered KSCO to demolish and haul away a significant portion of protective concrete around its building. I do not believe this is reasonable and will most likely be harmful to the lagoon environment. I have reached out to our 1st District Supervisor, Manu Koenig, for help. Though very sympathetic and understanding of our problem, thus far he has been unable to see a path forward to help us. I believe the best path forward is for the supervisors to vote on granting KSCO a waiver or exception to the riparian rule so that a beautiful community asset and the environment can be spared from destruction and harm. Here's what you can do if you want to help. Call the County Board of Supervisors at 831-454-2200. That's 831-454-2200 and show your support. Also, you can email all 5 supervisors at the single email address, Board of Supervisors, all one word, Board of Supervisors at santacruzcounty.us. That's Board of Supervisors at santacruzcounty.us. Email addresses for individual supervisors are listed on the home page of our KSCO.com website. Also, if you really want to help, attend a supervisors meeting, either virtually or at the supervisors meeting room, 5th floor Government Center, and speak at the beginning of the meeting during the public comments agenda item. The next supervisors meeting will be Tuesday, August 23rd at 9 a.m. As always, thank you for supporting KSCO. With your help, we hope to be able to continue our service to you.
Your business needs more space fast. No problem. Space is very reasonable at Anbar Self Storage in U-Haul, easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard. Spring cleaning special. First month free. Grow at Anbar Self Storage in U-Haul in Freedom. Clean it out, pack it up, and drive it right to your door at Anbar Self Storage in U-Haul. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. 24-hour security, 24/7 access. Spring cleaning special. First month free. Store it at Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
Asked what kind of family she wanted. She said, a family like yours.
Learn more about adopting a teen at adoptuskids.org. You can't imagine the reward. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back to the second half hour of the first hour, in which we're going to go back to the first half hour of the first hour.
Our cup runneth
to
over.
pick up John.
What?
Well, I understood what I was saying. John T's up.
I'll activate the time machine.
Right.
Actually, before I start, I just wanted to ask Billy a quick question about that that story about the Solomon Islands. That was actually, I found that a somewhat philosophical article in nationalinterest.org. Don't rule out intervention in the Solomon Islands.
That's right.
Billy, are they actually trying to make a sort of moral argument for
Yes.
For intervening, for the West intervening in the Solomons?
Yes, that's exactly what I came across. That's the conclusion I came to. They are trying to make a philosophical and moral argument to intervene. You know, the normal idea is you let countries make their own mistakes. You don't try to But modern liberal democracies do not engage in wars against each other for a couple of reasons. And one of them is that, you don't want to become an interventionist in another country's affairs. But in this particular case, I guess the idea is the Solomon Islands don't have enough worldly diplomatic experience to try to deal with a country as big as China.
Yeah, and with all due respect, I think everybody's always engaging and messing around with everybody else's affairs when it gets right down to it.
When you read that article, John T., you came across the same conclusion I did, that it is indeed turning into what can only be a moral argument?
Yeah, it really seemed. That's what made it so interesting to me, is that they were looking sort of big picture at what point in time does a world power say, look, these guys are just being abused by the CCP, so we need to step in and stop this.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, China might turn around and say, well, these poor folks are being abused by the West, so we need to step in and stop it. So there's it's a very interesting article from that perspective.
Yeah.
So we've got this situation going on in Sri Lanka. I'm sure most of our audience knows that they've had a massive sort of economic collapse brought on by some farming practices advocated by the World Economic Forum, and some corruption, and also by some very large loans that Sri Lanka took out with the Chinese Communist Party as part of the Belt and Road program. One of the largest chunk of the loans that they took out with China was to build the Hambantota port. I said it correctly, I think. They refurbished a very large port there. So now, just recently, China said, "Look, we want to take this ship. It's called the Yanwang 5. It's an advanced satellite tracking vessel. Essentially, what it does is it tracks satellites, tracks any sort of rocket launches. China's had these things going all the way back to Mao when they first commissioned a couple of them, and a lot of countries do. But this thing is actually pretty recent." The Yanwang 5, by the way, Wang means long view. It was commissioned in 2007. It displaces 25,000 tons. So this thing's big. It's got a length of 190 meters, a crew of about 470. So this thing's a real beast. And China said, look, we're going to come visit your port. And the Sri Lankan foreign minister said, okay. And then the Sri Lankan foreign minister came back shortly thereafter, after getting a phone call from India and the U.S. And he said, actually, can we defer that trip for a little while? But then I think it was the Chinese foreign minister came back and said, look, here's the deal. Okay, so you've got these loans with us, and we could, restructure those loans. They're also in talks for a substantial aid package in the range of about almost $6 billion from China. Of course, Sri Lanka is desperate for some kind of foreign aid because they're a total mess. So it's really kind of an interesting and ironic situation that Sri Lanka took out a loan with China in order to build a big port. China is now saying we would like to use that port. And when Sri Lanka tries to say, no, we don't want the heat. Of course, the Indian Ocean is very important from a geostrategic perspective. Iran, Russia, and China are looking at joint naval operations in the Indian Ocean, auspiciously to practice fighting piracy or whatever. It's actually this very same port that it was the loan on this very same port that's putting Sri Lanka in the situation where they really can't say no.
I'm just wondering, what if a country does say no? Just speculating. I know that the thought is that it harms their international credit rating. But if people know that
Sri Lanka has no credit
it
rating.
doesn't, yeah, that's where I was going, Billy. And you're basically down to nothing. And if the international community knows that China has you in a headlock, and you're basically defaulting and telling them to go away because you're in a tiger's mouth.
Come get your cement.
Come get your cement. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, the alternate
What's the
vehicle in
downside?
that situation for a heavily indebted country is the International Monetary Fund, who will also quite happily step in and set up a plan for your economies such that various international businesses will buy out all of your infrastructure. So there's that. But Estonia, I think, said no to Belt and Road in a very
that's
bellicose way not too long ago. And there were a couple Nordic countries, I think, that went that route. Of course, they're in a very different situation than Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka has, as near as I can tell, as near as I've read, no money. They are broke.
They're flat broke.
Yeah, they're poor.
Yeah, they have no money to buy food or toothpaste or toilet paper or anything.
Yeah.
That's broke.
Yeah, well, they're reliant on trade, and they don't have a vehicle by which to conduct that trade because they don't have money that they can use internationally. So they're reliant on dollars, but they can't really they can't get dollars in order to purchase things.
Would you like to loan Sri Lanka some money?
Well, I'd rather.
Depends on the interest rate.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. I would rather try to help Sri Lanka as opposed to letting China get more of their hooks in there.
Well, how do you help?
I don't know.
It's a tough one.
I
I think of Vanuatu, and I watched how China came into Vanuatu, the little nation of Vanuatu that essentially trades in bananas and oranges, and lent them the money to build this magnificent concrete government center. And it's probably the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life. And who built it? Of course, the Chinese laborers and engineers built it. So essentially, Vanuatu went broke.
Trying to pay for this structure.
Trying to pay for this
monstrosity.
edifice that nobody is using because it's so ugly.
Yeah.
And the Vanuatu people, the Nivans, they have their governments in these little apartment-like complexes, and it's just fine. So let's move on. We're going to talk a little. We have a little bit of time here to move on to the economic impacts of China, and ask the question: does the country have enough money to fight a war right now? So who wants to lead off, Billy?
Yeah, sure. I'll lead off. My conclusion is, my observation is no. The short answer is I don't think so. I think they're
And why is that?
Well, because they're overstretched. They have a poor real estate economy. They can't feed themselves properly. They have an energy shortage problem, and they're trying to conduct all of this commerce around the world with made up money. Let's go back to the Solomon Islands for a minute. They're the great example for me. A lot of money is offered to these little island countries, Vanuatu, Fiji. You go on and on and on, right? Well, I don't know if you remember back there's a little island called Nauru. Remember Nauru?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Nauru got famous for phosphate. And where they got the phosphate was from bat guano.
Yep.
Okay? Vanuatu was a beautiful place.
Nauru.
And Nauru. I'm sorry, Nauru was a beautiful place. They even were so successful at one time that they had 2 airplanes, Air Nauru, right? 2 planes. There were 727s.
That's like Air Vanuatu.
Wow.
Okay, but they were flying all over the place. They had regular routes, and everything was hunky-dory. Well, it turns out that they did not know how to manage their resource, and they certainly did not know how to manage their economy. And basically, if you look at Nauru now for the air, there's a giant crater in the middle, a really polluted lagoon.
That's like Butte, Montana.
Yeah. Basically, what they did was they dug all the phosphate out, and then it filled up with toxic stuff in the middle of the island, and they can't even live there anymore.
Good Lord.
They've all moved to another island.
So are you suggesting that that is somehow equate to China?
Well,
Is
I'm saying that China is forcing themselves upon other countries around the world. And I think that the end result in some of those countries might be Nauru in the end. Because I don't think, in reading all of this material that I've read over the last couple of months doing this program, I just don't, it doesn't occur to me that China is managing its economy well enough to deal with other economies in a...
That's what we're looking at, yeah.
I'm wondering, too, if there's an ecological implosion like this you were just describing, Billy, which is terribly sad, could be occurring in China as well. I mean, Michael, you've reported, several times about, the change in agricultural practices, right, that have really disturbed the farmland, limited available farmland in China. And we look at the net exporting of pollution to China, right? I mean, they don't really care about global warming or climate change. I mean, they kind of laugh at, Biden in the United States talking about this, because I don't think, from people I know who manage supply chains in China, they think nothing about dumping toxic waste out on open fields as byproducts of manufacturing.
As long as they can make the money.
Exactly.
As long as they make the money. Yeah.
Exactly.
Fire up another coal plant, not a big deal.
Yeah.
But that must have a dramatic effect on fertility rates. One would think. I mean,
yes.
If you're ingesting a variety of toxins, it's going to be, even if you're trying to have kids, you're going to have a hard time.
Very good point.
With that, John, do you want to pick up from there?
So, looking at the situation with Taiwan specifically, Beijing recently, after this Pelosi visit, they came up with some sanctions on Taiwan. And in previous episodes, you'll recall, Billy, I remember you talking about the ban on sand.
Right.
And I found that very interesting, because I thought, well, that's for manufacturing semiconductors. Well, it turns out there's some, in this fantastic article by the Atlantic Council, The Uncomfortable Economic Truth Behind Xi Jinping's Taiwan Threats. By the way, for our audience, all of the articles that we discuss here, you'll find them on ChinaWatchRadio.com. And please do sign up for our newsletter.
It's great, by the way.
Yeah.
This article was really kind of fascinating. So yes, they ended the sand thing, and then there's about 100 mostly sort of niche companies that China has imposed sanctions on. It ends up being some minuscule amount of their overall trade. It's something like 0.29% or something kind of irrelevant in that sort of realm. And to sort of get a perspective of the meaning of electronics in this situation, Taiwan's nominal GDP, that's GDP measured externally in US dollars, is about $850 billion a year. China's Taiwanese exports to mainland China and Hong Kong are about $189 billion, at least they were last year. So that's the exports from Taiwan to China are roughly about a fourth of the Taiwanese economy. And about half of those exports are electronics. So China kind of left the electronics alone. The other side of that coin, I'm going to just quote the Taiwanese finance ministry official here. I quote, Taiwan's and China's electronics industries are highly dependent on each other. Therefore, we expect very little chance of China imposing stricter economic sanctions on Taiwanese businesses. So if China actually imposes sanctions on Taiwanese electronics, they're going to wreck Chinese supply chains. They're going to wreck Chinese exports, mainland Chinese exports, I should say. So China, it's not going to be real easy for them to get real tough with Taiwan. And it's something that's going to have to be a major consideration of theirs if they ratchet up this sort of bellicosity. But now there's another side to this story here. TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, the largest manufacturer of semiconductors in the world. their sales to China have been falling precipitously. So last year, TSMC's sales to China accounted for 10% of their total revenue. The year previous, it was 20%. And that is actually largely due to the U.S. ban on shipments to Huawei.
Yeah.
So the U.S. steps in, says no more shipping to Huawei, and this is the effect that it has on the relationship between Taiwan and China. Meanwhile, TSMC is building a $12 billion factory in Phoenix. And of course, we just had the CHIPS Act passed in the U.S. That's $76 billion of subsidies and tax relief. TSMC is looking at another, I think, six more plants in Arizona. And another thing that really raised my eyebrows is that last year the U.S. accounted for 64% of TSMC's revenue. So China accounts for 10% of the revenue. The U.S. counts for 64%. That to me, that's painting a picture here in my mind. A growing 64% or a shrinking 10%. Who are you going to side with?
It's interesting.
Sorry, David. Go ahead.
Yeah, John. It's interesting what you're saying. If you recall, our venture capitalist from Australia we had here a couple of weeks ago. He was talking about all the sound and fury when China said, "Oh, we're not going to buy any of your raw materials anymore. We're not going to import. We're basically going to embargo imports from Australia to China." And then, kind of quietly, they turned around and wound up buying 90% of what they embargoed anyway. Yeah. I mean, to your point, Jonty, that you were making about Taiwan.
Right. Well, here's just a little tidbit on that sand ban. So it turns out, and I thought that was a big deal, but according to this article, the amount of sand for semiconductors that Taiwan was purchasing from China has dropped from around 80% of their sand in 2012 to less than 10% last year.
See, what you're talking about dovetails with what I was saying earlier in my observations about China and other parts of the world. They've got all these irons in the fire, and the fire's burning out.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Well, here's the punchline at the end of the story. So if you're living in domestic or in mainland China and you're part of the domestic audience there. This is what your news is telling you. The Economic Daily News is telling their audience in mainland China that the Taiwanese economy is beset by reduced export sales, rising prices, and a recession, and that its lower and middle classes are threatened by a spiraling cycle of poverty. Oh, those poor Taiwanese, we really need to go rescue them. Of course, as we all know, the exact opposite situation is happening. China's in real hot water in terms of its economy. So they're projecting, classic case of projection, right? They're saying that Taiwan is exactly what they are.
Well, our it kind of leads into my story too.
Go ahead, David. You're up.
But our banker friend we had on said, you can't trust the financial numbers coming out of China.
Don't believe anything coming out of China.
So when they say we're just as big as the United States, or we've got this, rate of growth of our economy, there isn't any real proof of it. And that leads into my story here, which is 5 Chinese U.S. listed companies, giant companies, firms, announced that they're delisting over audits on our stock exchanges.
So that's the reason why.
Interesting, yeah. So the listing agencies, the NASDAQ and the Dow, have been warning the Chinese for months, actually over more than a year, that they're in jeopardy being delisted if they don't follow in with standard accounting principles and practices. Because how do you know a penny of revenue is really a penny of revenue or of a profit unless it's all counted in the same fashion, right? So there's different ways to play tricks and cook the books,
sure,
as we know.
It's not who votes, it's who counts the votes.
Exactly, right? Exactly, yeah. And how you count, yeah. So what's interesting is that 5 companies now, China has decided rather than complying, these state-owned companies, instead of complying with standard international accounting practices, they're going to remove them, delist them from our stock exchanges. And these are actually, they're going to actually relist them on the Hong Kong exchange. China Petrochemical, China Life Insurance, Sinopec, Shanghai Petrochemical, Aluminum Corp of China is just some examples of these state-owned companies that are going to become delisted. There are many more Chinese companies that are traded on U.S. exchanges that are warned that they're also not in compliance. And so they may be in a situation where they actually get kicked off the exchanges if, you don't come into compliance with accounting practice.
These are big companies, too.
These are not small companies, and investors have been warned. In fact, investment in these Chinese companies on the U.S. exchanges has been dropping because of this risk of being delisted. Because if it's delisted, the only way you're going to get your investment back is if you are able to buy and sell shares over in Hong Kong eventually when the Chinese government relists them. And who knows if you can expatriate that money back out. I think what we're seeing here, though, is really it's part of the world decoupling. Right, this is that preparation of what's next. We were just reporting here about the semiconductor companies, right, manufacturing coming back to the United States. There's a lot of supply chain repatriation back here, and these separations and some of these entanglements of the financial markets I also find is an interesting coincidence.
Wow, there you go.
You know what it reminds me of? Reminds me of a flea market. When, you get all these vendors, right? And they're all got their tables out and they got their, their stuff they're selling.
Yeah.
And one guy insults his neighbor at the, in the flea market. And the next thing you know, he's gone. Oh, he's disruptive. We'll get him out of here. And then there's now a void. And if it happens too many times, then you start to wonder if it's not the flea market itself.
Yeah.
There you go.
That's right.
Well, with respect to the numbers, who can you trust, with respect to the numbers coming out of China? Because in the art of war, lying is just fine. Yeah. And as long as you're lying to advance your cause, to heck with everybody else.
All's fair in love and war, right?
All's fair in love and war.
Yeah.
And so... And I wonder about all of these bonds that Americans have been buying, for example, in the real estate industry, because real estate is real, right? Not so much in China. And as we have a couple minutes left, maybe I'll kick this off with my feature, which is in a rare this is from today's New York Times, which is... New York Times, I'm actually quoting something out of the New York Times. Wow. In a rare act of defiance, property owners across China who bought property from indebted developers are refusing to repay loans on their unfinished buildings. Now, this is huge because there are hundreds of thousands of people who are giving the middle finger to the banks and saying, I am not going to repay my loan. This in a country of totalitarian control.
It's a statement of capitulation. Oh, my goodness.
Yes. So these are people who face losing their social credits, right, for not paying their bills. What happens when you lose your social credits? You're not able to buy food. You're not able to get on public transportation. You're stuck.
It's your passport.
It's your passport. That's everything. So there are what an act of defiance. And what does this mean for the government of China? We'll pick that up when we come back on the other side, second hour, which is your hour.
831-479-1080.
There you go. We'll be right back on KSCO Santa Cruz. Don't forget our newsletter and our website, and we want you to go there. That's ChinaWatchRadio.com.
That's on the approach to the traffic light at Union Road. Weather forecast for today, winds could gust as high as 20 miles per hour. Tonight, partly cloudy with lows in the mid-50s. East winds around 6 miles per hour, becoming calm later in the evening. Tomorrow, foggy in the early morning hours, then gradually becoming sunny with highs in the high 70s. Calm winds becoming west-southwest 5 to 7 miles per hour in the afternoon. Boaters forecast for tonight, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots with gusts up to 30 knots, wind waves 4 to 5 feet. The time now is 6 minutes after 3 p.m., and that means it's time for the second hour of China Watch Radio.
China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitola Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Those are Chinese war drums, and you hear them all over the world right now because it's hot out there. We have China and Russia cooperating with each other.
And trying to bring Iran and other nations into the fold.
Iran, yeah. So it's kind of like the Axis in World War II, if you think about it. China, Russia, Iran, and it's going to get
Korea.
weird. So today we're looking at, in China Watch Radio, we're looking at the economic situation of China, kind of looking at different elements of it, and wondering if China does indeed have enough money to go to war over Taiwan or whatever. And so that's the subject on the table today. And, of course, the second hour is your hour, so pick up your phone and join us. We're at 831-479-1080. And finishing up the stories from last hour, I laid the housing crisis in China on the table. And a quick note, throughout for the last 20, 30, 40 years, real estate has really been the only safe place for people to put their money. And so people have put their money in real estate. And as a consequence, the value of real estate keeps going up and up and up and up, so it makes it even better investment. And so that's what China has been doing is buying real estate. And it was a real good deal. So the way it worked was that for years, property developers always had easy access to money to build things. Credit was easy, but here's the big deal. 90% of new homes were pre-sold. That's how hot the real estate market was. 90% were pre-sold. And not only that, people would hand over deposits and make mortgage payments before the construction was even complete. So as the house was being built, people were paying mortgages on it. And that system provided developers with the money they needed to keep building, and until recently, homeowners didn't complain because the value of the house kept going up and up and up.
Even just on paper.
Even on paper, yeah. So real estate was the big engine of Chinese economy. 30% of the gross national product of China was in real estate. 70% of personal income was in real estate. And then Xi Jinping pulled the plug by changing the lending and borrowing rules for real estate. And with those new rules, a lot of the big developers, most all of them, I think, went out of business, went bankrupt, belly up. And Evergrande being the big one, I think, was $307 billion. It
was enormous.
Enormous amount of money.
Michael, you've reported on this show, along with other experts we've had on it, that was one of the few ways that Chinese citizens could hold wealth.
What else is there? Gold and silver and real estate.
And you don't want to put it in a Chinese bank.
No.
That's a bad idea.
If we get past the tanks, it's okay.
So as a consequence of the collapse of those big builders like Evergrande, but it was not just them too. It was all of the related businesses like the construction firms, the landscapers, those painters, everybody that made anything to do with housing, steel companies.
Well, it's like economies around the world, including ours. You hear of economic reports, leading economic indicators, and one of them is new home starts. Because of what you're talking about, the eddy effect of everyone else in the economy.
So what is the extent of this mortgage rebellion? There's 326 tower projects nationwide in which the people who lent money to the builder are not paying for the mortgages. And, of course, who's holding the mortgages? The banks.
Well, we were watching videos of them detonating these skeletal towers. They're just bringing them down.
Yeah, it looked like Las Vegas.
You did, yeah. It looked like a new hotel, yeah.
Implosion.
Yeah,
So,
except there was a lot of them.
Yeah.
Boom, boom,
at one
boom,
time.
boom.
Yeah.
So ANZ Research estimates that this could affect $222 billion in home loans that are sitting on the bank's balance sheets right now, and which is roughly 4% of the outstanding mortgages. Now, that doesn't seem 4% doesn't seem like a lot.
$250 billion?
Yeah.
Oof.
But that's a pretty big hit. So in hundreds of Chinese cities, there are hundreds of thousands of Chinese homeowners just not paying. And it's, like I said, a huge act of public defiance. Here's an example that the New York Times gives up. A fellow named Andy Lee purchased a $150,000 apartment in 2019. Now, when we talk about an apartment, we're really talking about a concrete box that is not very big. And it cost him $150,000. So he put his down payment on it, and he's been paying monthly mortgage payments for 3 years, right? And he just learned that the apartment would not be completed as promised by this May, but that they might be able to get it done by December. However, all construction has halted. And if you call the person building, the company that built the building, they changed their phone number. They're not answering phones. They've gone. And so Andy says, we don't even know what happened to the money. How come there's no money? We will definitely stop paying the mortgage if there's truly no other way. So what can you do?
You know, I understand that I really have to step in here and just ask this question because it's so obvious. Somebody's got to ask the question.
Yeah.
In the United States, you don't buy a house that doesn't exist yet. You wait till they build it, and then you buy it.
Depends on the supply and demand.
No, wait. Name anywhere in the United States.
I can. It's actually in San Francisco. The good example is the Millennial Tower. So they pre-sold the units. But you're right, Billy. I don't think funds and title exchanges until the unit is complete.
As I understand, at least my own real estate contract with the bank.
Yeah.
I don't have to pay until there's something to buy.
Yeah. Well, the case of the Millennial Tower, those were pre-sold, and it wasn't until they moved in that they realized the building was actually starting to fall over to one side, and then they got stuck.
So that's a different problem.
So in China, the demand was such that what they would do is they would put up a model of a skyscraper.
Right.
And people would go into the sales office, and they would buy it. They would buy what is going to be built. Right? They give them the money, and then they get a mortgage, from the bank. And now they're responsible for paying the mortgage, whether there's a building there or not.
Okay, see,
so that there's no building doesn't mean a lick of difference to the bank, because the
mortgage paper's already written.
The person
signed the paper.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
I guess I just would not. I don't understand why people would sign such a piece of paper, knowing.
Because the demand was such. Because if
the
you
inflation
didn't
rate
buy
was
it,
so high on new construction that people just wanted to buy in as early as they could.
That's right.
Okay, I understand the concept. I just not for me.
The practice is not for me either, Billy. I agree with you. Yeah.
So now these mortgage holders are stuck owning the mortgage on something that isn't. It's not there.
So morally, do they have to pay it if there's nothing? They're not buying anything
because they borrowed the money from the bank to buy the place. They got a mortgage,
but they didn't actually get any money. They just borrowed a piece of paper.
Yes, but that's what they have. They have the responsibility of paying the mortgage on these places that are not there and will never be there.
And the lending laws are very different there than they are here.
Very different. Okay. Now, what are they going to do? Because if they don't pay the mortgage, they will be credit deadbeats, which will be reflected in their credit scores, right? And they're rebelling against the entire Chinese system.
Yeah.
So it's a way of what you've been describing, Michael, in the past, is them laying down.
Yes, they're laying
Now,
down, but with the obligation to pay.
Yeah.
Jaunty?
There's a variety of there's a variety of signals that we can sort of ascertain, and you're doing a very good job describing one of them, that seem to indicate a severe economic hardship in the works, coming, if not now, coming soon. Now, the question that I want to pose, though, is does that increase or decrease the CCP's bellicosity vis-a-vis Taiwan?
That is the good question. And what do dictators do when they are cornered, when they have their back to the wall?
Yeah, deflect, divert.
They deflect.
A mother bear, you got a mother grizzly backed up against the wall, right?
What a great observation, Jaunty.
Yeah, it is.
So, what is the answer?
Wow.
Well, I know the answer if you want to know it.
Sure.
I mean, I'm kind of joking, but there's
You're omnipotent until that point.
there is a scenario where we have a tendency to be very kind of within our contemporary mindset, our sort of zeitgeist about how things function when we analyze these sorts of things.
True.
All that's required to maintain a human being's life is food, water, air, and sanitation, all of which can be provided within a newly constructed coronavirus quarantine facility, some 6,000 of which have been built all over mainland China. So with regards to China is going to have an economic collapse, maybe they are quite happy to have an economic collapse. Certainly, the Chinese Communist Party has provoked a whole series of economic collapses. Maybe they're feeling like, gosh, we need a really good collapse. We haven't had a good purge for a while. It's hard to say. I'm certainly from an economic standpoint, no one would be expecting any sort of meaningful conflict between the mainland and Taiwan. I mean, based on the numbers I was discussing earlier, Taiwan would lose a fourth of their economy, and China it's very difficult to tell, but they would lose a substantial chunk of their export market. The real problem is, do they care?
Right.
Well, with all due respect, isn't this similar to the Great Reset?
That's what I was going to ask you, Michael.
This seems to me like they're deliberately setting up a Great Reset, as we are here in the United States. Don't have the slightest idea what we're going to be reset to, but they seem to be intent on having a Great Reset.
That's right.
I wonder if our reset is tied to their reset. Maybe.
Well, to certainly have Bill Gates hanging out with Xi and high-fiving and complimenting them on their efforts against the coronavirus and all these sorts of things. So some of the Great Reset players are friends, seem to be friends with China. Xi was a guest speaker at the World Economic Forum not too long ago, as I recall. So I don't know that if they're adverse to that sort of thing. I see a lot of the Great Reset as a cadre of billionaires who see themselves gaining more power and influence by advancing certain technologies and essentially buying up the small businesses and small farms that have made the general population restive, resistant, and independent for several hundred years.
Yep.
Well, not to stop the line of thinking here, but we are a news talk radio station, and I've just been informed that the plane collision that Susan Simon spoke about at the beginning of this hour apparently was not on the ground. It was a mid-air collision.
Oh, good Lord.
One mangled airplane is near Calabasas and Buena Vista. Netcom is now reporting that the other aircraft is at the other end of the airport. So obviously there'll be some traffic problems around the airport, particularly if you're on Buena Vista or Calabasas or near the other end of the airport. I guess that would be Airport Boulevard or maybe even Freedom.
Yeah, Airport Boulevard. There.
So
I'm thinking Aviation Way also.
Maybe Aviation Way. So anyway, we'll continue to follow the story. Thank you, Susan. Not to derail our program, but we're in the business of trying to keep you informed. So that's the latest we have on that
half
story.
Half of our crew are pilots here too.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
That's exactly right.
So there we are. But at any rate, so let's get back to the ball game here. The question on the table is, do we think China has enough money to fight the war? So let's ask around and then go to the phones, which are at 831-479-1080. Jonty, do you think China has enough money to fight the war?
I think that their situation may put them. They really might not have a lot of choice. I'm not sure. It's real tough to tell. But I think that they might even have their back up against the wall. They might be cornered. So I'm pretty worried about it.
Okay, Billy?
I don't think they have enough money to get it done myself. I think they're overextended. But I'm with Jonty. It scares me that they're overextended to the point where they might have to fight their way out of it.
David?
I think they appear to be more of an implacable foe than they actually are. I think they're, in some ways, it's a paper tiger that has a couple of teeth, maybe a few teeth that are missing, but they're dangerous. And I think because you brought up, Michael, earlier, that they're perhaps cornered in some ways, right, that they don't have a lot of options. I'm going to be actually really interested in answering that question after the Congress meeting in November.
Oh, there you go. I, for one, think that they don't have enough money to do it right now, but I think that their relationship with Russia gives them what they need to be a mega superpower.
To get the raw materials and things like that.
Raw materials, the food.
The
petroleum.
Yeah.
I think that relationship with Russia, now I don't know what Russia's plan is when you hug a giant bear like China. I don't know what you plan to get out of it.
Yeah,
it hasn't
scratched.
Yeah.
It hasn't been very fruitful to date. But with that relationship, I do think they have the wherewithal to take on not just Taiwan, but the entire Pacific Basin.
One thing China's proven over and again is that through the arc of history and time, is that they can winter down. They can hunker down and winter over almost anything.
Oh, yeah, and sure.
And suffer through.
They could lose 100 million people.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, let's ask our audience, the folks listening. Dick in Santa Cruz is patiently waiting on the line. Let's take a phone call and bring you on China Watch Radio.
Good afternoon, Dick.
Yay. What you guys were talking about in the beginning of the second hour, that's a whole program about, I think I brought that up about whose reset are we going to do, China's reset or the globalist reset?
Oh.
Or
like
are they
Chauncey
different?
Yeah, like Chauncey said, one of the leaders of the global reset, and COVID, I might add, is a big part of that. That's a whole big thing, which I wasn't prepared to talk about, but I am a little prepared to talk about a couple of different things that you talked about in the first hour. One subject was the Wuhan lab origins, and the other subject, which I don't know if you touched on much, that's about China's weapons they have right now, and some things that were in the news recently. Which one do you want first?
Let's go with Wuhan.
All right. So last summer, Joe Biden dropped the investigation on the Wuhan origins, which you guys are all probably know. I don't know if our audience knows, or remembers. That's usually what the left wants to do. They want you to forget everything. But they supposedly had a big investigation, through NSA and internal State Department, and they said, the origins of at Wuhan for COVID, we're not looking at that anymore. And they just dropped it. And on top of that, the CDC just removed a claim on their website that the spike proteins don't last long in the body. They removed that from their website last week. So maybe that's something else that people aren't aware of. And the fact The fact also about COVID was the cost of COVID for the United States, I think they're referring to, was the cost of World War I and World War II combined as far as the outlay of the trouble it's given the United States. And so COVID, this whole thing about the origins and Fauci and gain of function and what they're doing now with monkeypox maybe and what we're still doing. I mean, talk about needing an investigation for democracy.
If such is the case, Dick, why did President Biden close the door? Why did President
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, I want to hear what you have to say. Why did President Biden close the door on the investigation into the Wuhan Virology Institute?
It's just like the NBA, Hollywood, all the entrenched Democrats, DNC, they're all going to do their bidding for usually money. And in the Biden's case, I think they probably have so much on Biden and Hunter that would make your head spin, you know? That's why. And it's simple as that. It's pure evil selfishness. And, you know, now, if I can, real quick, I don't know how many callers you got, but I did want to talk about Taiwan and China, because just lately, last time I talked to you, I was talking about some of their advancements, and it was commented by Chauncey, I think, that the cost for their military advancements is much less than ours. And one general in the U.S. Air Force, Cameron Holt, made a statement recently, July 22nd, that China acquires high-end military weapons 5 to 6 times faster than the U.S.
Well, you know how they do that. That's easy. They just steal them from us. All the research and development. We pay for all the research and development. And
no, that's not it. We might, some basic technology, but we don't follow through. Have you guys heard of CubeSats?
No.
Chauncey, CubeSats, no?
Don't know what those.
That's the latest AI. It's AI. Basically, it's clusters or swarms of small AI satellites that work together to destroy our satellites. That's another one that they are pretty much got down. And then,
Dick, I'm not totally convinced that China acquires advanced weapons at 5 times the rate of the United States. I'm not exactly sure where you're getting that information.
The word acquire. Yeah, I know. I was questioning that as far as the word acquiring. I know they're putting a lot of effort into it. Hence, what I was talking about, the supersonic development compared to ours. I mean, we just finally got one supersonic thing to work at about 6x, and they're shooting 24x at us or around the world. Now, one of the last things has to do with supersonic missiles that I wanted to mention, that, and you guys probably know this, that just recently, after Pelosi's famous visit that I think was just a setup between Biden and Xi, just to promote, well, I talked about that last time. Anyway, since then, 50 fighter jets with supersonic missiles aboard that are able to basically take out a whole U.S. aircraft carrier flew around Taiwan. Over 50 fighter jets just recently flew around Taiwan. Now, you guys probably heard about that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's why we say it's getting hot, hot, hot. Does China have the money to fight the war? What do you think, Dick?
Oh, yeah, they're way ahead of us. They could take the Pacific, and if we try to do anything about it, they're ready to do a reset, where I don't think we are. The globalists, I think China, what they're doing to these poor guys that go in and pay money on little models for an apartment and get a mortgage on a little stick model inside an office. That just shows you the desperation that's going on over there.
So and there you go. Well, Dick, thank you for the call. We're loaded up here and roaring to go. Billy, thank you, Dick.
Do we need to take a break?
We do need to take a break. Our half-hour break. We'll be back with more of China Watch Radio in just a moment. Stick around.
Fresh, prepared, twice daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
Satisfy your hunger right now with the delicious ramen and sushi you'll find waiting for you at Kaito. Easy in and out location in the Capitola Mall food court. Special orders welcome. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
This is Koji. I'm looking forward to seeing you at my restaurant, Kaito.
And now a special message from KSCO owner Michael Zwirling.
Last week, we ran a 3-minute message concerning a dispute KSCO is having with the Santa Cruz County Planning Department. The county government has ordered KSCO to demolish and haul away a significant portion of protective concrete around its building. I do not believe this is reasonable and will most likely be harmful to the lagoon environment. I have reached out to our 1st District Supervisor, Manu Koenig, for help. Though very sympathetic and understanding of our problem, thus far he has been unable to see a path forward to help us. I believe the best path forward is for the supervisors to vote on granting KSCO a waiver or exception to the riparian rule so that a beautiful community asset and the environment can be spared from destruction and harm. Here's what you can do if you want to help. Call the County Board of Supervisors at 831-454-2200. That's 831-454-2200 and show your support. Also, you can email all 5 supervisors at the single email address, Board of Supervisors, all one word, Board of Supervisors at santacruzcounty.us. That's Board of Supervisors at santacruzcounty.us. Email addresses for individual supervisors are listed on the home page of our KSCO.com website. Also, if you really want to help, attend a supervisors meeting, either virtually or at the supervisors meeting room, 5th floor Government Center, and speak at the beginning of the meeting during the public comments agenda item. The next supervisors meeting will be Tuesday, August 23rd at 9 a.m. As always, thank you for supporting KSCO. With your help, we hope to be able to continue our service to you.
Your business needs more space fast. No problem. Space is very reasonable at Anbar Self Storage in U-Haul, easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard. Spring cleaning special. First month free. Grow at Anbar Self Storage in U-Haul in Freedom. Clean it out, pack it up, and drive it right to your door at Anbar Self Storage in U-Haul. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. 24-hour security, 24/7 access. Spring cleaning special. First month free. Store it at Anbar Self Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
Asked what kind of family she wanted. She said, a family like yours.
Learn more about adopting a teen at adoptuskids.org. You can't imagine the reward. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. This is your hour on China Watch Radio, so pick up your phone, 831-47-1980, and give us a call. Billy.
All right, let's check in with Mike, who's called us from Aptos this afternoon. Mike, you're on China Watch Radio. Thanks for calling.
Hello.
You there?
Hello.
We can hear you.
Are you in the bottom of a barrel?
You keep talking about weapons of war in China. China doesn't need any weapons. They don't need any guns. They've already taken over the world. Why would they need a weapon?
I tend to agree with you. I really do. I think they have done such a superb job of capturing our elite that they really don't need any guns.
They don't need a weapon. They've already done it. They've taken over all the shipping channels. They own 80% of the African mineral rights and oil rights. They all over South America. They're into Mexico. Canada's going communism. It's a matter of time.
Mike,
they don't need a.
Is there any way to deal with them now, Mike?
Nope. We let it go too far. They got us by the balls. We can't even go buy a new car until the Chinese say we can.
That's disconcerting.
Nobody can buy a car. Do you believe that? In America, we can't build cars?
There you go. You know, and if you look at the reason why we can't, well, those plants that manufactured cars were dirty. And we got rid of all of our dirty industry. We gave it to China. And so we can be clean. And now we're clean, and they're in charge.
There's 13 new car plants in Mexico. They're not allowed to ship the cars up until the Chinese tell the Mexicans it's okay.
That's interesting.
China owns Mexico. And they've got the drugs to come in and kill this whole country if they want.
That's an interesting supposition, because to what extent...
It's that situation. The bang, bang, you're dead wars are all over. It's all at the banks now.
All right. Well, thank you for the comments and for scaring us.
I've got a quick little tidbit, guys. Something I wanted to mention earlier. I came across this little piece analyzing government financial data out of China, and they're looking at Chinese government debt. They're looking at spending versus income, and in the first 6 months of this year, China's run about a $740 billion deficit. Their total debt in 2001 was around $7 trillion. So as a percentage, that's an enormous increase just in the first 6 months of this year. And I kind of wonder what would be causing that, and what sort of a trajectory that's spelling out for them. They don't have a reserve currency quite like we do, so they have a little bit harder time running into debt. But even with the egregious amounts that the U.S. has been plummeting into more and more debt, we're not going up 10% a year, or 10% in 6 months, mind you. That's an incredible increase.
Wasn't that consequent to China shutting down its economy? I mean, just locking up everybody in welding their doors shut.
Well, it's the first time I've seen a number attached to the cost of doing that.
Knew it had to be big. Who's up, Billy?
All right, let's check in with Steve. Steve is in Marina. You're on China Watch Radio. Thanks for calling.
Hey, Steve.
Hello, Steve. You there?
Maybe he's not there anymore.
Maybe he's not there anymore. Steve, you still...
I'm here.
Oh,
I'm
gotcha.
here.
Hey, Steve.
Right, good.
Okay.
I have a phone made in China. What do you expect? Anyway, regarding China, regarding COVID-19, I just heard on the news last week that China is extending their Social Security release 5 years. Instead of 65, it's now 70 you've got to be before you get elected. And I've been saying for decades that the baby boomers are going to get socked in the gut with something like COVID-19 or something that will kill us. Now, when I was in grade school, there was a fictitious kind of storyline we were reading about how carnival rides, etc., that were fatal in some instances, were used to cull the population on a regular basis. So what's happening is this. China is releasing a virus that will kill off 10% of the population, period, for just the exact purposes of making their economy float by decreasing per premature death by 10 years. You're talking $400,000. We'll just say $1 million after inflation. I mean, $500,000 after inflation. So $500,000 per person that dies, they're saving.
Well, you know what's interesting about what you're saying is if you think about the COVID fatalities, it is most pronounced among the elderly and the disabled, who are the highest cost to the economy.
Right.
Ditto monkeypox, another conspiracy to mind control us. And, you know, if you think about our karma, monkeypox, COVID-19, fraudulent elections, biased mass media, deep state, FBI, CIA, mass shootings every week. If we didn't deserve all that, we wouldn't be experiencing all that. So what are we doing wrong?
Ooh.
We're giving Stephen King a pass. That's what we're doing wrong.
Good try, Stephen. Thanks for calling. Yep. All right, let's move on to. I knew it was coming.
We were circling the drain there.
You know, the thing about it is, he was right on the money, right up to the end.
Well, he's got great insight.
No, he really does. Yeah. All right, John in Marina, let's take a call from you. You're on China Watch Radio.
Yeah, I was listening to earlier whenever you were talking about Solomon Islands and South Pacific there. And just an interesting fact I've been following for a while. I served in the Marine Corps, and I actually have a son who's currently in the Marine Corps.
Oh, thank you for that
The
service.
Marine, no problem. The Marine Corps has gone through some massive changes here in the last couple of years with the new commandant that came in.
Oh boy!
In redesigning, and it is very controversial. Trying to redesign the Marine Corps solely. Well, they would take on the other task, but solely to fight China in the Straits of I'm trying to the names
Malacca Straits in Taiwan.
The Malacca Straits.
Not so much time, but basically almost an island hopping campaign. And the idea is if they could stop the Chinese Navy through occupying islands in small groups of Marines, that this is what they're designing for.
That was interesting. That did not work for the Japanese in World War II. That was the Japanese strategy, was to hold a bunch of little islands.
That's right.
And use those islands as island bases to prevent the U.S. Navy from
using
taking
them for
over.
turning them into airports,
the U.S. Navy just steamed right on by.
So John, tell me about your son. What does he say about this new idea the Marine Corps Commandant has?
It's way above his head. We've talked about it a few times. He's actually exiting the military here soon. You know, he's more interested in what life has to come. But if you're interested, look it up. The Marine Corps is basically disbanded all of its tank battalions. Actually disbanded, I think, 2 to 3 infantry battalions. Over half their artillery batteries to reformat and this new policy. And the idea is they'll be able to occupy these islands, and the Marine Corps is really going heavily on rockets, rocket artillery.
I'll have to look up. I'll have to look up that reconfiguration just to see what they're trying to do.
Another reconfiguration they're doing with the military is the woke ideology that they're bringing in.
The pronouns.
Well, the
Navy SEALs need some good pronouns, don't they?
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Who's next? Thank you for the call.
Yeah, thank you for the call.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Let's see. Who is next? Let's see. Gary in Live Oak, you're next.
Yeah, I know everybody's looking at far away, but all you need to do is look in Santa Cruz itself. Diane Feinstein.
Gary Arnold. Thank you, Gary, for calling. But we're not talking about Sam Farr or anybody. We're talking about China.
Well, if you knew Russell Lowe, do you know who he is? He was the so-called cabbie, for Diane Feinstein. And she's the head of the Intelligence Committee, and you won't talk about it. In fact, you cuddle the communist Cuba.
Okay, let's talk about Diane Feinstein's cabbie. Tell us about that.
Okay, his name is Russell Lowe, which you should know, and he was not a cabbie. There's pictures of him signing Diane Feinstein's petition to be mayor of San Francisco. In fact, he attended numerous events at the Chinese Council in San Francisco, and he hasn't been even shuttled out of the country. He shows up right here in Santa Cruz, and you guys would never know. But Russell Lowe is up there with UCSC taking pictures and being touted about. That's just one of them.
Wait a minute. Is he or was he Nancy Pelosi's or Diane Feinstein's chauffeur? Was that what?
No. We've got pictures. I got pictures. In fact, I think I've sent them to you, but somehow they get filtered out so Amy and the other people can't get the data. I'd certainly encourage you to give your host an email address so that they have whistleblowers giving them information. They can dump it in the trash if
That's
they
not
want.
a bad idea. That's not a bad idea. Why don't we
You
get
can email info@ChinaWatchRadio.com,
There you go.
and we get emails all the time from people, and we've got emails from you in the past, and we've handed them around as well.
Okay.
Info
well, anyway,
at China Watch Radio. Everybody can email us, and it'll go straight through to Jonty. And if it's a hot piece of news, we'll love to hear about it.
Thanks for the call, Gary.
Thanks for the call, Gary.
Yeah. All right, John in Watsonville, you're on China Watch Radio.
Oh, man, as always, what a fountain of knowledge and insight you all provide. I just wish it was required listening for anybody under the age of, say, 21. But be that as it may, seriously, you guys are endlessly entertaining and informative. I called one other time and I posed the question about how much of the desire for the mainland to take over the island itself had something to do with the fact of, saying about 1947 and 49, when Chiang Kai-shek was leaving China himself. Mm-hmm. He raped the royal treasury, the imperial treasury, and estimates differ. The least estimate that I can see is 113 tons. The biggest estimate I can see is 166 tons of gold. And knowing that fiat currency is manipulated and that the price of gold always goes up, gold never loses its value. How much? I know that China had to start off in 49. Mao Zedong had nothing that he could rely on to anchor his yen, but he did have inflationary problems at that time too. But yes. How much do you think that the fiat currency crisis that China is undergoing now could be ameliorated by the fact that they could get their hands on, let's say, 150 tons of gold?
Well, it's unclear how much gold Taiwan had a Republic of China had taken or actually had won or transferred as part of the fleeing to the island of Taiwan. There were significant artifacts that were taken that belonged to all 7 major dynasties in China. And I've seen those, by the way. If you go to the National Archive in Taiwan, I was talking to the curator there who said that, I asked him, well, how much of this stuff do you have? And it's gorgeous. It's all the fine stuff. He said if we rotated the display every week for 7 years, for all 7 dynasties, you would finally start to repeat.
Yeah.
Wow.
The depth of treasure that they've had.
Well, even if it's the lower figure of tonnage you were talking about in gold, that's still a substantial amount of money, of material to back a currency.
Yes.
I don't want to pop my own bubble, but, in 1942 or 1941, the Japanese took from Nanking over 6,000 tons of gold.
Which was the capital.
Yeah, which was the capital, but the remainder of it was stripped as far as I can tell. For the majority of it, I mean, Mao had almost nothing to base a currency upon, from what I can read. It's very difficult to find a source that you can believe, by the way. I've been researching this for a long time.
Yeah, it's a very big problem.
So I think people wait.
We've been working on that one. Who do we believe?
What I do, yeah, but I'm wondering, okay, just as a matter of degrees, how much do you think that would be part of China's desire in order to...
it's an interesting question. Probably, they're thinking about that for sure. But it's also interesting to note that the real big war between the East and the West, between China and the U.S., is about the reserve currency.
Exactly.
Yes,
which essentially is fiat money.
Yeah.
It's the fight to who has the best fiat money.
I think Jonty wants to jump in here.
Yeah, I mean, from what I understand, China has fairly substantial national gold reserves, something around 20,000 tons. And that's about doubled in the last 10 years. They've been purchasing gold like crazy. I don't know about a $160,000 gold reserve that Taiwan has. That's something I'd have to dig for. What I'm seeing is that they've got about 400 tons of gold, officially at least.
Yeah.
But the whole idea that Putin was pushing recently was that the BRICS countries, and they're adding all these new countries to BRICS all the time, would have a basket of commodities, gold being one of them, that they would use to base a reserve currency off. But that seems to be happening very fast.
Yeah. I wish we would have, the wherewithal to maybe buy some gold and back up our own currency. Just to let you guys know, John's phone dropped off. That's why we got that large feedback there when it dropped off there. We did not do that. I think his cell phone bit the dust or something.
Yeah, John, thanks for calling, though. You had a really great, interesting point of view.
Yeah, and it does make you wonder if some of our big currencies around the world had more backing, we might all be better off.
Or maybe less backing. Maybe
throw it all away and just
no. Maybe if it didn't have so much backing, then it would have to be more real. Because I look at our dollar and the extent to which it's being debased right now.
Oh, because it's not backed by, who knows how much gold's in Fort Knox?
It's backed by a printing press.
Yeah.
Right. So essentially what we're doing, what was it? We just came out with $1 trillion bill. What we're going to do essentially is steal $1 trillion from our grandchildren and great-grandchildren.
Wow.
So we're going to take that money from them. It's a great way of stealing money, don't you think?
Yeah.
They're not even here yet.
Steal
so we can steal them blind.
Is that a victimless crime?
And we don't have to pay it back.
Yeah.
We don't have to, so it's no sweat off. It's a great way of stealing money.
What a racket.
I don't know if I want to put it that way, but okay.
Think about it if you're a politician. Well, it's a great way of stealing money.
I guess, if you're looking at it that way.
I don't think it steals from our grandchildren because I don't think the intention is ever to pay it back. The intention is to add new money to the system and to use that money to manipulate.
They're going to essentially destroy the dollar, right?
Yeah. The loss happens immediately. There's a concept called seigniorage, which means that when the king coins new coins and spends them, the king gets the advantage of front-running the inflation that those new coins are going to cause. So the most valuable those coins will ever be is when they're first added to the system. So in a huge part of our economy, $3.5 trillion, is having a government that adds that money into the economy every year and decides where to add it and who's back to scratch, essentially.
Sure.
All right. So before we move on with the program today, let me bring you up to date on what we've been talking about all afternoon. Two planes have collided over the Watsonville airport, and we now understand that it looks as though at least two people have died in that midair collision between two small private planes above the Watsonville Municipal Airport. This took place right around 3 o'clock this afternoon. One witness said he saw two planes attempting to land when they clipped wings, and one appeared to then flip on its side before crash landing. The second plane, a larger twin-engine aircraft, continued down the runway and smashed into a grassy field, igniting a fire before it careened into an airplane hangar. That plane, officials at the scene said, had one man, a woman, and a dog aboard. They were all pronounced dead at the scene.
How sad.
So we're going to follow this story as we move on through the afternoon. Flight 1080. Unfortunately, the name of the program that follows us in this particular newscast.
But they have parachutes.
Anyway, Flight 1080 and our news guys will be following that this afternoon. We'll try to help them get updated information as we move on through the remainder of this broadcast.
It sounded like the twin was on a long final.
Yeah.
And the littler airplane made probably a short cut into the final, and there they were met at the same place at the same time.
Flying out of the airport. That's a problem at that airport of guys,
shortcutting the final.
Somebody's shortcutting, and they're jumping in front and trying to take off.
Apparently, though, it did not actually happen on the ground. They were in the air when they clipped each other.
Wow.
Anyway, so just a reminder that because we're a news talk station, we do follow the news in the middle of talk.
News and talk.
That's what we're we're doing here today. Getting back to the program today, I think we've done a fairly good job of talking about the Chinese economy. I don't know that we've decided whether it's good or bad, if it's going to survive or not.
But, I
certainly
think
something to look at.
The most interesting point is it really doesn't matter to them whether it's bad or good. I'm not sure they really care one way or another.
I agree with you. I think everything's an opportunity, right? And it's how you actually leverage it. I have a sense, and this is just a sense, that everybody's kind of holding their breath for the next couple of months with the upcoming elections in China. I don't know if we're going to see much. I mean, some people could argue you could see an event to try to trigger, an outcome with the National Congress. But I wonder, it just seems like we're in a waiting period a little bit.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, here's something interesting.
A quiet before a storm, sorry.
Most of the analysis that I've read on the topic of how to invade Taiwan, they all point to a specific time of the year at which it pretty much has to happen because there's some weather issues, significant weather issues. And that time of the year is October.
Mm-hmm. Right before the election.
November election.
Yeah.
So
it's all going to come to a head here pretty quick.
Should we take bets?
No.
Get a pool going.
Going.
Yeah. I'd really have to change my bet every week or so as different information comes to light. It's so difficult to see through the fog of all the headlines. They kind of want to get you to click and read their articles and get excited about the certain political perspectives, and they don't necessarily do the kind of analysis that's required in order to think coherently about these sorts of things.
Yeah, it's really amazing how much information has come out about China and its incursion around the world and its economy and all the rest of this. It's very interesting to see what has come to light in the last couple of months. Anyway.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's going to be an invasion of Taiwan, but I think that there could very well still be some kind of military action that could get very serious. It could involve AUKUS, United States, Australia, India, Japan as well. These are frightening and also interesting times to live in, no doubt.
No doubt about that. I want to remind folks that Jonty has put in a lot of work on our website, ChinaWatch.com. Please go there, sign up for the newsletter, and read the articles because, boy, we all sound like we're really smart, but we are. the articles,
aren't we?
The articles,
aren't we smart?
Well, you are at least.
Well, I don't know about you, but I don't know about me. But Billy's smart.
What do you mean we, Kimosabi?
Well, we usually cover about a third of what we put out in the newsletter.
Yeah. That's about right. Listen, Jonty, thank you. We'll talk to you next week. And you guys, that's the end of our program. Flight 1080 is on the way. We'll see you guys next week if all goes according to plan. This is KSCO Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey. Dave and the Flight 1080 crew will bring you up to date on all this afternoon's news.